A little earlier this morning, I spoke to Alex Salmond. He was, of course, the First Minister of Scotland until the referendum 3 years ago. I started by asking him why Scots should vote SNP in the local elections when the Scottish Government has just cut central government funding for councils by an average of 2.6%.
Well, the fund is actually a funding increase going into Scottish councils this year, Andrew. And if you look at the funding position, for example, between Scottish councils and those in England, which is obviously directly related through the Barnett formula, then the funding in Scotland has been incomparably better than that in England. So there's a whole range of reasons to argue that a great deal of protection has been offered to Scottish local councils, and that comparison with what's happening south of the border indicates the protection that the Scottish Parliament has been able to put in to help vital local services in Scotland.
But there hasn't been a funding increase, Mr Salmond. The block grant from Westminster to Edinburgh was increased by 1.5% in real terms, but the grant to councils was cut by 2.6%. It was going to be a cut of 330 million. The Greens then got you to reduce it to 170 million, but it's still a cut of 170 million or 2.6%. Your own Aberdeenshire Council has had a cut of almost 3% for this year, from 402 million to 391 million. You've cut the money to councils.
Yeah, but councils have availed them more resources this year, and as you rightly say, the budget increased that further, which is why they put forward an excellent local government budget in Aberdeenshire and resisted, incidentally, a Tory attempt to knock £3 million off the... Well, you asked me about Aberdeenshire, and Aberdeenshire's put forward a budget for investment and expansion and actually resisted a Tory attempt to knock £3 million off the education budget. And I'm very grateful you've given me the opportunity
your
to
government
make that
has
point.
the government in Edinburgh has cut the money to Aberdeenshire by £11 million. It's a cut.
But there's an investment budget in Aberdeenshire this year, and that's been made available by the ability to increase the council tax by 2.5% after a 9-year freeze in Scotland, and that's brought more resources into local government, and that's why the budget in Aberdeenshire has been an investment budget, including protection the education budget, in the face of a Tory and Liberal attempt to cut it.
Okay.
I mean, Andrew, you have to compare what's happening in Scotland with what's happening in England, and there's no doubt that Scottish local authorities have been much better funded than those in England over the last few years, and that's been the ability of the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government, to protect the services at local level. A good reason for voting SNP.
If they've been so well funded and if services have been so well protected, why, after a decade of SNP rule, do 1 in 5 Scots pupils leave primary school functionally illiterate?
Well, I mean, there's challenges in education, Andrew, but you've got to take these things in the round, and Nicola Sturgeon's made it a top priority to address these challenges. But let's take another statistic. 93% of Scottish kids are now emerging from school to positive destinations. That means to further education, to apprenticeships, or into work.
Why are 1 in 5 functionally illiterate?
So don't tell me... Well, you know, you argue one statistic. I'm arguing that in the round, Scottish education is putting in some substantially good performances, like the 93%, a record figure, who are going on to positive destinations. You can't have a failing education system if you've got that 93% and, incidentally, a record low youth unemployment in Scotland. We're now the second lowest unemployment rate in Europe. These pupils are being prepared by the Scottish education system.
Well, let's take the figures in the round on education. It's so important. Scotland used to be thought to be among the best schools in the world. But under your watch, under your government, the Scottish schools in the most important global comparison have fallen from 10th to 19th in science, 11th to 23rd in reading, and 11th to 24th in maths. That is a record of decline and failure.
Well, that's the OECD PISA rankings, and there's many question marks around them. But since it's the OECD rankings, the OECD has also described Scotland as one of the best educated societies in the world.
That was from the school system in previous years gone by. For those who are currently in Scottish, for those who are currently in Scottish schools, you've fallen from 11th to 24th in mathematics.
No. the OECD was commenting on the introduction of the new curriculum for excellence, which they've given a resounding thumbs up to, and that's the same source as the PISA rankings which you are comparing. Now, Nicola Sturgeon has said there are challenges in Scottish education, particularly about the access through the education system and the attainment gap. But don't tell me it's failing when 55% of our pupils are going on to higher education. That is one of the most impressive figures in the world, Andrew.
Why have you cut 4,000 teachers?
Well, the pupil numbers in Scotland have been falling over recent years as well. And now, of course, we're increasing the number of people going through teachers' training so as we can make sure that number increases. But listen, the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament have been subject, as you very well know, to real-term spending cuts over the last few years. And all public services have been under pressure. But the main reason in terms of teacher numbers has been the ability and the attempt of the Scottish Government to protect the teacher-pupil ratio. That is now going to be enhanced by a further intake into Scottish education.
But you promised in 2007, you promised that you would reduce primary class sizes to 18. And instead they're now 23.5 and rising. You broke that promise.
Well, you didn't mention where they started from Andrew. I mean, we've kept the teacher-pupil ratio very solid in Scotland, and that's been against a range of public expenditure cuts. But the new intake of teachers into the teacher training in Scotland, I think, is going to enhance the system, and that's very much to be welcomed.
OK. You've spent in the past year in Holyrood 43 hours on government time debating independence. How many hours on government time have you debated education?
Well, I don't have that figure to hand.
Well, I'll give you then. The answer is zero. On government time, you have spent 0 hours debating education. Isn't it time that the SNP go back to concentrating on the day job?
Andrew, yes, you very well know Nicola Sturgeon has identified as her key priority closing the attainment gap in Scottish education. That's exactly what she's done. And this is that. Let me answer the question, Andrew. The difficulty being a remote location is if you talk before I answer the question, then the viewers will not be able to listen either to your questions or to my answers.
I let you answer that without saying a word. Just finally, Mr. Salmond, is this general election about independence, as you say it is, or not about independence, as Mrs. Sturgeon says it is?
No, I've said exactly the same as Nicola Sturgeon on that. I mean, the issue of independence will be decided in a national referendum by the Scottish people. The mandate for that referendum was gained in last year's Scottish elections. What this election about is backing the right of the Scottish Parliament to exercise that mandate and also providing real opposition to this Tory government and, of course, allowing the Scottish Parliament to resist austerity and some of the public expenditure cutbacks that you've been talking about. That is what this election is about, backing our Scottish Parliament.